We are happy to announce that this episode of the SWW show is partially brought to you by Humble Bundle. Well, not really. We are part of the Humble Bundle referral program, and we just wanted to say that if you like really cheap games and maybe helping charity pending the Humble thing going on, all you have to do is go to humblebundle.com/partner equals SWW. That's right, humblebundle.com/partner equals SWW. And you just do your normal stuff, and it just kind of helps us get a couple bucks here and there. Maybe it helps AJ get his lights, maybe it's Mike camera, maybe we actually pay Corey for helping us out. But again, if you're going to go buy games anyway, it might be worth checking out.
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Tim, but online I go by Wallaber, which is the name I use on everything, including my company. And I'm a professional game developer. I've made a lot of different games. I had a long career working at big companies like Disney and Universal. And my dog's going to chime in from time to time as well. But I don't know if you can hear that or not. And then recently I've gone indie, and my big release is JellyCar Worlds, which is actually a sequel to JellyCar games, which some listeners may have heard of from back in the day, around 2008. The very first one came out. It was actually a Disney game on the early App Store and things like DSiWare and WiiWare and PSP and stuff like that. But I was the original creator of that game. I made it while I worked at Disney. And then now that I'm an independent creator, I got a chance to kind of revisit my design and take everything I've learned over the past 15 years and make a new version, which is the one that's out now, JellyCar Worlds. Yeah, the concept is kind of a unique concept. So I mean, it's a car made out of jelly. I guess that's pretty obvious from the title. And the whole game is based on soft body physics. So everything in the car is very squishy. It can get totally smashed flat and then just kind of like bounce and wiggle back into shape. And I was inspired originally by similar games that had that kind of physics in them, like Gish and Loco Roco and games like that. And so that was the original idea for the game, and it's still kind of unique. Like there hasn't been, other than a few games that people made that were very clearly directly kind of inspired by it and made almost the exact same concept as JellyCar. It's still kind of a unique concept. And I've just generally really enjoy physics-based games. I think they're unique and fun in that because everything is based on physics simulation as opposed to a simplified system, you have like a lot more possibilities. It can mean it's a little hard to control or it takes a little getting used to because it's not just like, press a button and you definitely jump. It's more like, how do I get the character or the car in this case to bounce in a way that produces a jump? But because of that, everything is kind of natural and intuitive. And if you just think physically, well, how could I possibly do this, whatever the challenge is in the game, and you can probably pull it off. And there's usually multiple ways to do it that are all valid if the physics system, resolves in a way where you get where you're trying to go or you achieve whatever you're trying to achieve. So I really love those types of games because they're very open-ended and players can often discover strategies or solutions to things that the designer didn't even think of. And when you add mechanics, they all tend to combine in really interesting ways. And so it's just like a really, a game design point of view, it's a concept that has a lot of opportunity. And so I just kind of wanted to go back to that sandbox and playing it again. I've also learned a lot since I made the original game, and so I felt like I could uh, I could kind of make the good version of it, like the best possible version of the concept. So those are kind of the main reasons. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, well, the fun part, I guess, as a designer is because of that sort of. I mean, it probably wouldn't be fair to describe the game as a sandbox game, right? That would make you think it's like an open-ended game that doesn't have many goals, and you can sort of. And that's not exactly the structure of the game, right? But yeah, but it does have it does feel playful and sandboxy in the sense that all the mechanics and things you can do are all based on this physics system, and so as a result, they combine in interesting ways and stuff. And so for me, making the game feels like I'm playing a sandbox game to a certain degree because what will happen is I'll discover something you can do in the game. Like I mean, a super simple example is um, one main thing in the game is there's these different abilities that you get, and all the abilities let your car do something. So the first one you get is a grow ability. So you're driving along and your car is kind of normal car size, and then when you use the grow ability, it's like whoop, and the tires inflate really big, and the car almost kind of turns into like a monster truck or something in terms of scale. And at first it's just like, oh, cool, you can definitely use that to like get over a gap that's too big for your car that you can't jump over normally because your car's just bigger now. But then you start to notice other things you can do. And you're like, oh, I can lift heavy things or push objects around. So then you start coming up with ideas for puzzles where it's like, oh, maybe there's a big boulder that you need to fill a gap so you can drive over it. So I got to go get under the boulder and then grow big to push the boulder. And then you start to realize, wait a minute, even just the act of growing kind of bounces you a little bit. You can kind of just jump over gaps just by growing at the right time and maybe tilting the car a little bit or that kind of thing. So usually what will happen is I'll I'll either think about something that might be possible and then test it and see if it is, or I'll just happen to discover something while playing around with the mechanics. And then that gives me an idea. And then usually what I'll do is I'll make a level about that specific idea. And so that's kind of how I approach making all the levels is by each level should have some kind of unique idea in it that comes from the mechanics of the game and then allows me to kind of showcase that aspect of the game and then kind of let the player discover it for themselves as they progress through the levels. Hmm. Hmm. Right. Yeah, it's a little bit of both. So as I was mentioning, the game's kind of structured. It's called JellyCar Worlds because there's a bunch of worlds, and each world is kind of like a little section of content, kind of like a Mario game where there's like different worlds that have 8 levels in each one. So there's 1-1, 1-2, and then you go to world 2 and 2-1, 2-2. It's that kind of structure. And I really liked the different abilities I could come up with for the car. So that's the main structure. It's kind of like each world is focused on a car ability, and then there's a bunch of levels in the world that kind of mix and match that ability with the other mechanics and obstacles and things in the game. And so like the car abilities themselves were mostly kind of things that sounded cool and then tried making them work. And then one thing that definitely does happen though with a physics-based game, if you have an idea for a mechanic, sometimes it will work and sometimes it won't. And it's hard as a game designer because sometimes you really want to put something in the game, but you can't get the physics to do it. And I have a point of view, which is that, well, the whole point of this game is that it has to be like true to the physics. So I want to like cheat as little as possible. I don't want any like invisible hand kind of helping the car do something or like, like, so for example, there's sticky tires in the game and you can just stick to surfaces and drive up the walls and stuff. And there's probably ways I could implement that were really like um, what's the word? Like they were less physics in based. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, like that kind of thinking. Like there's lots of times where you can kind of put on a more traditional game design point of view and say, well, there's a trigger over here, a visible trigger, and if you're in the trigger, we just like magically like push you against the wall so you'll stick to it or something like that. But if I don't put that trigger somewhere, you won't be able to do the sticky wall thing, right? And and so I try real hard to avoid that going down that kind of a path because that's kind of counter to the sort of whole premise of the game that it's based on physics. So the sticky tires are based on if your tire touches the surface, there's a little spring that's kind of like pulling that one piece of the tire towards that specific spot it touched the wall. And if you pull that spring too far, it gives up and like breaks and lets go. And so you can literally stick to anything, but if your tire gets too kind of pulled or separated away from the wall, it will lose its like its stick. And so that is like I mean, sure, I like invented that, right? It's not like I simulated, something super deep down to the individual atoms or anything. Like it's a simplification, but it is like physics based in nature, and so it kind of works everywhere, and it always worked in a consistent way. And that kind of style of coming up with and implementing the mechanics tends to work better, both because it's better with the player expectation, like that's how this game works. It's physicsy, so if the tires are sticky, they should stick to everything, and they should stick in a consistent way. But also, it's likely then that the mechanics will combine in interesting ways. Because if it was based on the hidden trigger, then you probably could never stick to a moving object unless I have like a moving trigger or something behind the background trying to make it all work. Whereas if they can just attach to anything with the little springs I was describing, well, that works for everything. And then once you have moving objects and you can stick to them, you start discovering new mechanics that are only possible because your moving objects system and your sticky system work together naturally. Mhm. Yeah, it's a little bit of both. The game has a kind of weird backstory because most people who have played the old one played it on a phone. So like if anyone out there recognizes this game, it's very likely that they remember it as a game they played on a early iPhone or like iPod Touch or something like that. And so in their mind, it is a touch and tilt game. It just came out back in the day when like tilting was still kind of a common, control method. Yeah, no, yeah, yeah, and so lots of people associate it with that point in time and think of it as a game that was like intended to be played on a phone. When actually the very first version was created with a controller in mind and was going to be on Xbox back when Xbox had like that like thing where you could make your own games called XNA for Xbox. This was many years ago, like 2007-ish. And so I originally designed the game with a controller in mind, and but then ported it over to the App Store when the App Store came out. And at that time, I was like, I don't know how to make this game work, but maybe I could. Oh, and then I kind of thought a control scheme where you touch the right hand side of the screen to drive forward, the left hand side of the screen to drive backward, tilt your phone to do the rotating of the car, and then tap the car itself to grow and shrink, which at the time there was only that power up. There weren't all the ones that's in the game now. And so it just kind of happened to work pretty well on a phone. Also, it's the viewpoint is nice. Like you're pretty zoomed in on the car. Like it works pretty well to have a handheld device. The levels are short. A lot of these things kind of worked well where it was a pretty good fit for mobile use case. But so it's always just kind of worked out that I think the number of inputs on the car is not very many. You basically have, accelerate or drive and reverse and tilt. and then like infrequent button presses for abilities, and it's usually only one or two at any given time. Very rare that there's a level where you use like, four abilities or something. So just the fact that the number of inputs is small, it makes it more, you know, portable, I guess, to different device types and input types. So it worked great on a controller. The controller is kind of ideal because you can use the triggers to drive and the left stick to rotate your car, and then you have your other thumb free to press the face buttons because you don't need to control a camera or anything, for example. So you can use the face buttons to do the abilities. And that maps pretty well to keyboard with like arrow keys and A and D keys to rotate, and then you have a few free keys you can use for the abilities. And like I already mentioned, it works pretty well on phone. So this is kind of I think it's mostly just a result of that the game doesn't have particularly complex input. Yeah, I mean, aside from the core gameplay, which is kind of a weird driving platforming hybrid thing, which actually I think like if people have played the like Trials series, like Trials HD or any of those sort of motorcycle games, side view motorcycle games, that's actually probably the closest thing to this game. Like this is like Trials, but you're in a cartoon world essentially with a squishy car. Is probably the best way to kind of get people to kind of envision the right thing about how do you control it and what are you trying to do. But like I said, it's in the cartoon world, and so the part that I think is kind of additionally interesting and people really like about the game is that it's very customizable. So the whole concept of the game is like it's taking place in a flipbook animation, like a flipbook doodle that you might draw in the corner of a math book, or you go get like a notepad and draw a little animation, then flip through it and yeah. So the concept is it's a flipbook doodle that kind of came to life and is interactive, and or you're kind of playing a living flipbook or something like that. And so all the sounds in the game, for example, are human voice because my idea is that it's hand drawn, someone drew it, and while they're flipping their flipbook, they're making the sounds as it goes. If you drew a little car flipbook, you'd be like boing, and you'd like make the noises. So that's all the sounds in the game, and all the visuals look hand drawn. And so because that's a very kind of personal theme, right? My idea is that the player, it's their flipbook, their doodle that they drew, and so you can customize the car in the game with like an amount of customization you wouldn't normally find in a game like this, where you can literally go into a little paint program in the game and pick colors and markers and crayons and just scribble whatever pattern or design you want on your car. It's a little bit like a Forza game or something where you can do crazy livery designs, but with like crayons and markers and stuff. So you can totally make the car, yeah. So you can make the car really look like your own. You can put like a silly smiley face on it or something that means something to you on it. And you can do that for the tires and stuff as well. And then the like ridiculous thing that you can do is you can in the game record your own sound effects and replace all those human sounds with your own voice. So instead of hearing me go boing brown or whatever, you can replace all those sounds yourself so that it's your car and your voice, as you're playing the game. And I think that I don't know very many games that let you do that, and maybe it wouldn't make sense for every game, but for this game, I think it does. Yeah, and it's like I think it suits the concept that I was talking about. That's why it makes sense to have that feature in this particular game, especially because it's all human voice. So why not let it be your voice, kind of thing. Um, but it is the kind of thing where it's like that sounds great, and then when you go to implement that feature, it's like, oh, okay, I gotta. Well, what about this sound? What about that? It's like it ends up being this like the screen has got like I don't even know how many, like 40 sounds that you can replace. So it sort of balloons into this big feature. Because if you're going to do it, I mean, I can't have one sound, but it's like you can't customize. You know what I mean? Like once the feature's there, like you got to do it. Yeah. So it kind of turned into a larger feature, both for me to implement, but also for the player too. Like, I mean, you don't have to override every sound, right? You could just do the main ones, like the car engine and the impact sounds gets you like 90% of the game play. But you can go and do them all, you know, and I think that's kind of cool. Yeah, so Apple Arcade essentially, you know, is that subscription. So if you're an Apple Arcade subscriber, you get the game included with that, and that will work on all Apple devices. So iPhones, iPads, Apple TV, and Mac. No, just go to jellycargame.com if you want to check it out. And also, I guess if people are listening to this are interested in how games are made, I also stream on Twitch a couple times a week, working on the game. Just like I have, you know, I'm typing in code and I'm doing level design or I'm making graphics or UI layouts or all of it. I streamed pretty much the creation of the entire game, and I'm going to continue to because, of course, I'm going to do updates and add new things to the game and stuff. So if anyone's interested in that, feel free to come find me on Twitch. My username is Wallaber. Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy we made it through with only a little barking. So thanks for having me.
The SWW show and all of its affiliate podcasts are podcast by me, Mike Maroney, and AJ Losi, sometimes by our contributors, including Corey King. You can follow the SWW show on social media at the SWW show, or sooner or later you go to patreon.com/SWW to help us out. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.